2, 1. And let's just wait a little bit, see if we can get some more people joining here.
Awesome.
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and answer my question first, but I'm calling in from San Francisco here. Dylan, if you want to go for it too.
Yeah, I'm calling in from Toronto, Canada.
That's awesome.
I think for once up north, it's actually probably as hot where we are as you guys.
Yeah, I mean, San Francisco is typically a bit chilly. I mean, it's like summer, as in like 68 degrees. But I think Mark Twain coined the term, the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. I may have butchered who that was from, but nonetheless, our summers are typically a little colder, but yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, we've been heading close to like 90 Fahrenheit, 30 plus Celsius the last little bit. So it's been a heat wave for sure. But I am not complaining. I do not enjoy the Canadian winters.
That's awesome. Dylan, you got any summer plans?
Nothing too crazy. Just doing a few events, going to New York in a couple weeks, and then other than that, doing some East Coast travels later in the summer as well in Canada. But nothing too crazy. How about you?
Yeah, nothing much. Just going to be making I have a trip down to San Diego, as well as I think I have a couple events down in San Diego. So I might try to consolidate those. But I'm going to be doing some good camping and yeah.
Nice. I'm in San Diego in September.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think we got couple folks still joining. Happy to just kick things off here. But hey, everyone, super excited to kick things off here with the first episode of our Peak Prep Unpacked. We're going to be doing something really awesome that we've never done before, a live brand audit. And we brought on our great partners with Aplo Group to execute on a live brand audit for a customer of ours daily routine. That's a female probiotics business. So with that being said, happy to get into it. And yeah, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat and we can answer them at the end. But I'm going to keep this conversational and super excited to kick things off here. Just for starters here, I'm Zach. I lead our agency partnerships team. Been here for about 3 months. Before this, I've worked at various e-commerce SaaS businesses and so on. So I've been around this space for a bit and been super excited to learn more about ShipBob and the operations side of the business. And Dylan, if you want to do a quick round of intros here.
Yeah, of course. I'm Dylan. I'm one of the co-founders at Aplo Group, and I oversee all things growth strategy. Been doing this for over the last 5 years, and oversee our media buying teams, email and SMS teams, as well as creative strategy teams at the company.
Awesome stuff. Sounds like you got your hands full, my man.
I do.
And then real quick introduction to ShipBob for those that aren't aware. ShipBob's a global fulfillment platform. We can handle all fulfillment for your various sales channels. So 100 plus sales channels, 50 plus fulfillment centers across the globe. We're supporting over 7,000 brands on the platform, and we actually just came up on our 10-year anniversary. So that being said, you can see some of our great logos and super excited to get into a little bit deeper on how we're supporting brands as well as working with our agency partners. Dylan, if you want to share a little bit more about Aplo Group here.
Yeah, of course. So at Aplo Group, handle a variety of channels, obviously already touched on super briefly, paid acquisition. So mainly your socials and search, retention marketing, email, SMS, push notifications. Obviously, some of those channels also play a role in customer acquisition. We also do creative strategy and net new creative development. via things like studio shoots, custom production, so on and so forth. And then some other services we offer as well, and sometimes all looped together, is financial modeling and forecasting. So we'll chat through some of the importance of that specifically today, and how linking that back to the growth planning side on the marketing is integral. And then for some clients as well, they'll also choose to engage us not in a done for you, but a done with you type model with our fractional CMO/COO services. And we've worked with tons of brands, 90 plus at this point, and managing into the 7 figures in monthly ad spend at the moment.
Awesome stuff, man. And the whole purpose of this webinar and live audit is we really want to highlight just the overall importance and intersection of different key aspects of e-commerce businesses today. Agencies like Aplo are going above and beyond to look deeper into a brand's P&L, like Dylan said, far beyond just the ad account, and they're recognizing just the key importance of looking into a brand's total expenses and costs to make optimizations across the board, not necessarily just within the ad account, but really taking a more consultative approach. So to kick that off, we thought Aplo Group was a great partner to do this, as well as we identified a customer that would be a great fit for an audit from them, as well as they recently got on ShipBob. So super excited to dig into some of the optimizations that we found from an operational standpoint, but as well as what Aplo Group discovered from an acquisition and retention standpoint. But a little bit of context on Daily Routine. They've been around for a few years now, doing about $1 million in annual revenue. They're a complete probiotic supplement for women's health. They're currently selling on their Shopify site, of course, as well as they're selling through the marketplace love.com and Amazon. They're also looking to get set up on TikTok Shop as well pretty soon here. And they have an eco-first packaging and subscription model. So with that being said, that's a little context on Daily Routine itself, who we're doing this audit for. And I guess to kick things off, really want to focus on 3 key parts with this audit. So acquisition, retention, and then operations, and tying those all together is going to be very important. But Dylan, want to pass it over to you in terms of looking into the brand's data from an acquisition standpoint on Meta. What were some of the few things that you quickly realized, as well as some recommendations that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, for sure. So before working backwards as it pertains to like what should the actual in-platform end outcome be from a target standpoint, obviously that'll kind of relate back to some of the economics of what the LTV is, and we'll kind of get into that as we kind of go through this presentation. But firstly, just on like an ad optimization level in terms of like low-hanging fruit changes that could possibly help improve performance inside of the ad account. So in terms of ad volume, there's not really that many ads live in the grand scheme of things. So like broadly speaking, in terms of how many ads are getting launched, focus on increasing the volume there will likely give you a better chance of finding more net new winning creatives. Now, ultimately, quantity, quality, there's a pull there. You want to make sure that there's still high quality ads as the quality is going up, but ultimately it looks like there could be more done there. That kind of also gets into the creative testing as well. Some of the creatives look to be very similar to one another. And as it pertains to especially some of the best practices that have been rolled out in terms of ASC or even just in business as usual campaigns in the Meta ecosystem, focusing in on having multiple angles being tested across both stills and videos would be an integral next step in our recommendation. Additionally, one low-hanging fruit, given the subscribe and save functionality and the kind of like buy more, save more functionality on the site, could try language pertaining to like that up to X% off, depending on what the offer actually is at that point in time. Additionally, based off of some of the initial metrics we saw, there could be potentially over-reliance on default account optimization as it pertains to ad attribution. So inside of Meta, you'll generally see by default a campaign using 7-day click, 1-day view. And for some brands, that is A-okay. But oftentimes when it comes to brands with high LTVs, you'll frequently see view attribution make up a high percentage of all the conversions tracked, which are often less so correlated with net new customer sales and just more so claiming attribution for a sale that may have occurred anyways. So again, this is a general statement. It doesn't necessarily mean that a specific thing is going to be the ideal outcome, but further testing in terms of attribution settings between 7-day click and no view, 1-day click and no view, and 7-day click, 1-day view could be one of the levers to be pulled to improve new customer ROAS efficiency or new customer acquisition cost efficiency, no matter how, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Hearing definitely a lot, just overall the importance of testing several different creatives and just continually testing those new creatives to reach new demographics on Meta. Would love to know a little bit on just your take on what you're seeing with brands in general beyond just daily routine, but maybe just overall this year. I know Meta ROAS is pre-COVID numbers. And it's a lot of brands are struggling with profitability on Meta specifically, but what are you seeing overall from an acquisition standpoint with Meta, and how is Aplo Group helping brands achieve their goals with that?
Yeah, I'd say overall, if you like zoom out and look at the entire year to date, it's actually a fairly strong year as a whole. Maybe not the strongest year ever, but by no means like the weakest year ever, without pulling like specific metrics. But I would say that when you zoom out, things look solid. When you zoom in, there's definitely like moments of volatility. I think some Meta reps and some people may even say so themselves, like there were like problems in the Meta ecosystem earlier this year. I'll say that I don't think our teams ever found Meta to be as buggy as it is right now. They're rolling out a lot of new features. And while I'm a big believer in some of the features that are getting rolled out and how that could improve ad performance in the long term, definitely some interesting issues that may not as much impact performance, but even just from a day-to-day management standpoint, can arise. So overall, solid year. I think in terms of main things to focus on as it pertains to maximizing performance during this volatility is just remembering that in-platform performance only reports so much, and that it's generally not going to be the best data to reference to actually decide how much should I go and spend. That should be based off of the contribution margin being created from first-time customer sales, which is our way of saying profit pre-fixed costs, and or just contribution margin created across the entire customer base. And then, working backwards from there and using some of the reporting methods, whether it's in Meta or whether it's a third-party tracking tool, to distribute budget, but not necessarily decide how much should be spent. The brands that are focusing more on those high-level business metrics and the P&L, in our view, are making the better decisions to lead to better in-platform events versus, say, just going off of what Meta is telling you, or Google, or so on and so forth. So again, overall, pretty solid year, but definitely has its technical difficulties, I'll say, as they roll out some.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of what I'm hearing across the board
products
from a lot of agency partners, as well as just brands themselves. Curious in terms of the just to keep it on brand in terms of omni-channel, as well as brands moving omni-channel and testing new channels and so on. Obviously, with the emergence of Meta shops, when and where do you think it makes the most sense for brands to test out Meta shops? Should they always at least test out Meta shops? And what are you seeing with brands maybe similar to routine in terms of testing Meta shops as a acquisition channel?
Yeah. I think for most brands, testing it is a good option. I think for brands where there is a high LTV, or they rely on a very specific mechanism to convert customers into subscription and or higher average order values, there are scenarios where testing shops may have negative implications, where even if that first order return on ad spend or first order CPA makes more economic sense, if it does, the long tail of that is when you extrapolate the potential LTV of a sale from that channel versus, say, on site, you could run into some issues there. And I think routine's like a prime example of a scenario where this could have a little bit more potential danger. Even like any brand that doesn't have subscription, I think you still have to be cautious about, okay, like what do you lose by not collecting that email necessarily on the pop-up or this or that, by not sending people down that customer journey on the site. You have to start thinking about, should I have a different target for customers converting on shops versus on the site, and kind of go from there. So as a general statement, I'd say most brands should probably go ahead and test it, but ultimately it definitely depends case by case, and making sure it makes sense economically once it's rolled out is integral to executing that long term.
Yeah, for sure. I could see with routine specifically, given it's a product that might require a little bit more education, that maybe on like a one-day click-in platform, it might look pretty strong performance on Meta shops, but overall, maybe those Klaviyo flows, SMS flows are doing a lot of education that if they were to go to the website, it would actually have a higher conversion rate over a slightly longer attribution window. So I think testing is the answer here, and just making sure that you're viewing things more holistically rather than just something as narrow as a one-day click on platform.
100%.
Awesome stuff. And then going into Google, would love to know just your overall thoughts on kind of what they're doing on Google. I looked at it myself and looked like they were, it was somewhat limited in terms of they didn't have a whole lot of Google campaigns going, but love to hear your take on everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, the brand is currently more so like a Facebook-based brand, and given the category that it's in and the offer that seems to be, running and working, I don't think that's necessarily surprising. Ultimately, the spend currently is fairly distributed across a bunch of campaigns. It is, I would say, in the early days of Google for the brand, and it might make sense to see some consolidation between some of the campaigns in the early days, just behind what is actually working best before going in and building up some of the, I guess, the more standard campaigns, if you will. I think another thing too, as well, is making sure that PMAX is properly excluding those branded terms. Ultimately, there are cases where that's not the case, and that can lead to some difficulties in properly assessing metrics and performance. So making sure that that is in place would be a recommended next step, and then measuring off of that to ideally see more incrementality from those campaigns. So that would be the recommended next step. Beyond that, there could certainly be some non-branded search campaigns that could be focused on, but in the short term, given the opportunity inside of the Meta account, it probably makes sense to put the bulk of the net new dollars spent there. It ultimately comes down to what the goals are. And like, this varies business to business. Like, if you're in the mode of like, I want to be as efficient as humanly possible, and I'm not that concerned with growth, someone may say, hey, in this situation, I want to go and basically focus on those non-branded search terms because that may be more efficient than Meta. But the probability in this category of that being like remotely as scalable is very low. So again, this is when it comes down to like, am I trying to get the most out of a platform, or am I going to try and get the most out of my business? Because if you're trying to get the most out of your business, depending on what that thing is, that will dictate which platform you want to go allocate dollars and time behind. And I think Google should definitely be a part of that strategy. I'm not saying don't focus on Google, but just based off of those initial metrics and given the size of the business, having that focus in Meta in the short term, focusing on PMAX and maybe some basic branded search is probably where you want to go. Maybe shopping if PMAX is having some issues, and then kind of circling back to some of the other campaign types later on.
Yeah, super interesting. What are your thoughts on brands experimenting with YouTube, given it's under Google's umbrella? But when and where do you think advertising on YouTube makes the most sense? I know that it can be somewhat pretty high in the funnel and maybe great for higher AOV products, or maybe products that require a little bit more education as well. But like, when and where do you typically recommend brands testing some dollars with YouTube?
Yeah, I think first of all, YouTube ad attribution is difficult given like where some of the ads display. Using other measurement methods, whether it's post-purchase surveys or a variety of other options, could be deployed. I think for most brands, you're still going to generally see Meta, Google, and TikTok be the primary spenders. And like, this is a question where it's really hard to give like generalized advice, because depending on the stage of growth in the business, frequently what you're going to want to do is go and allocate dollars behind the thing that's most likely to lead you to the business outcome you're going to try and drive. And in many cases, if Meta is already working and Google's already working outside of YouTube, focusing on those two things could make sense. But if you feel like you're kind of tapping out those channels, and or you feel like you want to go get diversification, or in your example, I have a super high AOV, going and testing YouTube can certainly be a path. But generally, there's a few barriers of entry. There's that attribution piece I brought up. And then secondly, on top of that is also creative. The creative content that tends to work well on YouTube is often a little bit more higher production than some of the creative being tested on, say, a Meta ad. Not always, again, general statement, but it's integral to realize that, the needs to feed that channel are going to be a little bit different. And again, for routine, maybe not the place to go right now, but for a larger business or a business that, has a different setup, by all means could certainly be a place to test and see if you can get some ad spend at KPI.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think with YouTube, it can be almost similar as something as like connected TV. Like I watch YouTube, I'm an avid YouTube watcher myself, and I watch on my smart TV when I'm laying in bed. And like, when I think about
Me
memorable
too.
YouTube ads, I end up watching like the whole thing, but I'm not clicking through. I'm not necessarily, it's not direct response. I'm not going and purchasing something or opting in or any way that I could track. But then months later, when I am looking for said product that I saw, or even some non-e-commerce like experience, some restaurant or something, that's sticking with me, and I'm remembering that ad. That is, it might not show any return on a last click basis, but it is 100% the reason that I bought that product.
Yep, agreed.
Awesome stuff. And anything else to summarize, just from an acquisition standpoint, whether it's in reference to daily routine or just overall what you're seeing with brands in terms of new strategies, as well as ways that you guys are cracking the code in terms of new customer acquisition?
Yeah, I think when we get into the LTV part of this, that I'll kind of loop it all together. I have a few good notes about kind of setting those KPIs and how to actually assess where and when you should be spending. So this is basically a retention audit to some degree. What this actually is just an example of what the lifetime value metrics are for this brand. And the LTV metrics are exceptionally strong. And ultimately, what we would view as like the next best step to go and assess how are we actually going to scale this brand to KPI? Well, first of all, is assessing what is the goal. I want to go and do X% year-over-year growth, or I want to maintain X, Y, or Z contribution margin, net margin as a percentage, a dollar figure, and then understanding, okay, like on a multi-year time frame, on a short-term time frame, like what is the end goal we're trying to drive here as a business, and then looking at, okay, given the LTV and given how many customers tend to come back, how do we basically take that historical data to understand that different new customer ROAS outcomes or different new customer cost of acquisition outcomes at different volumes of spend? What do we have to achieve to go and achieve that level of growth with that level of profitability in terms of how many customers we have to acquire each month at what efficiency to get there over time, and then actually plot out an expected P&L between where we are now and where we're trying to go. That would be step one. Step two would be, what do we actually think is possible and what do we actually think is happening? Because depending on where you're trying to go, the probability of building a plan against that depends on, you know, the historical data that has been referenced, and based off of that historical data, the probability of it even being possible. So in this case, understanding that would be important. And then how you actually work backwards from there, and to maybe answer your first question about how do you actually go and execute in these channels? I think one of the biggest things that get overlooked, especially for high LTV brands, is planning your spend throughout a period of time with that profit figure in mind, where you can estimate where you think you're going to get not only the best acquisition efficiency, but also the best lifetime value efficiency. So I'll give you one example of that. For a lot of brands, September is this super awesome, unique moment where a lot of brands will go and leverage a Labor Day sale. Via that Labor Day sale, you'll frequently see better acquisition metrics, the ability to scale with less attrition in results, and this awesome little benefit that a couple months from now, it's the holiday period. So frequently, when you're looking at your 2-month LTV, 3-month LTV, 4-month LTV, that September cohort is often for many brands substantially more valuable than say an April cohort or a May cohort. And again, all generalized statements, but actually building a plan based off of that historical metric where you understand that your new customer ROAS is probably going to be good that month. The scalability is probably going to be good that month. And you have a high degree of confidence the value extraction from those customers will be higher for that month. So that would be the biggest recommendation I'd say from the brands that we're seeing that crush it, both from who we work with and, friends in the industry, is like, having a very, very, very strong understanding of like, when can I get the best yield on my dollar spent? It's not just about the Facebook ROAS today or even the P&L today. It's about the P&L extrapolated over a period of time. And when you plan that way too, that can also greatly help on the inventory planning side, and kind of go into that realm, which is obviously getting more towards Zach's side of things. So that would be my biggest recommendation and what we see most frequently for brands that are crushing it currently.
Yeah, totally. Super good stuff. And given just this slide is on the retention side of things, and I know you oversee also the email and SMS side, but in terms of preparing for Q4, I know obviously a key strategy is acquiring a lot of customers to your own channels for those key Black Friday sends, but what are maybe some other optimizations from an own channel email SMS standpoint that you're seeing or recommending with your brands to prep for Q4?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, back to just like, again, like setting targets on a business wide level, specifically with SMS, can be an incredibly costly platform. So making sure you truly understand, like, hey, like, does it really make sense for me to send this many MMSs when it costs this much more to send those things? So from a cost management standpoint, really zeroing in on SMS. I think on a true ROI basis as well, this can vary by brand, but ultimately with SMS, given the higher cost for the platform and how attribution works, the truth is that Klaviyo is probably over attributing in most cases the incrementality of the sales that it drives. The reason why is because at some point the demand had to come from somewhere initially, and Klaviyo in most cases is just converting the demand. It's not to say it's not valuable. It's just to say that in some ways it may not be fair to truly attribute all those sales back to Klaviyo. A lot of people opt to not try and measure what that actual incremental sale value is, though, due to the complexity in doing so, and because the email ROI is just so ridiculously high that it doesn't really matter. But with SMS, there are more cases where it's a little bit more, close in terms of ROI being driven. So really making sure you're understanding that true SMS value to make sure you're not oversending. That's not to say don't go and send a bunch. There are some brands that can send a crazy number of SMSs and continuously drive high volumes. But that's the biggest thing and one of the biggest mistakes we see. And then the other thing leading into that Q4 period, for some businesses, this is easier to kind of identify than others, especially if you've ran a promo in the past that is repeatable and you understand. A lot of brands will opt to, let's say it's the month of November, and let's say you are running your Black Friday sale from the 15th to the end of the month. Well, the 1st to the 14th, your efficiency metrics may not be as high as the end of the month. And let's say full funnel, you want to have a 3 ROAS by the end of the month. Some brands that are executing at a very high level will understand that they're willing to actually spend slightly below KPI in that period in the lead up if they know their consideration phase for purchasing products coming off of an ad is longer than that, because they know that going into that promo period, they're basically filling up their email list with a bunch of prospects that may have a much higher probability of converting due to that sale event. Now, that's a riskier strategy. You want to make sure you have the data to back that up in historical sales and manage the risk and think about downside scenarios, so on and so forth. But that's one of the biggest things, is maximizing that list collection in the lead up to the big event and making sure you have clear financial targets about doing so.
Yeah, super interesting. I've worked with some brands in the past where they had such a high AOV, like think high-end furniture over $3,000 AOV, that they couldn't even optimize off in-platform or attribution platform metrics, because it was such a long window that it took at least 3 to 5 months to even get that initial purchase, that they actually decided to optimize based off of email or SMS signups.
100%.
Just because it was easier to track from like a direct response point of view, just being able to actually see the efficacy of those clicks and where do they result in after.
Yeah, I'll double click into that just because I think it's super interesting, and just to be abundantly clear on one thing. So we've had clients where there's similar kind of conversations around like, what is the real end KPI we're optimizing for during these periods? Because you can basically extrapolate out the value of an email in the lead up to these events. If you know that it's going to take that long to convert X, Y, or Z, if this is the cost per email subscriber or SMS subscriber, you're going to convert X% of them over the next Y amount of time, and you can kind of estimate what your future yield will be. Again, a riskier strategy, but some brands have to deploy. What we've found you don't want to do is just try and get email leads via, say, like on Facebook ads, you can run ads optimized for email leads, but the quality of those leads may go down. So it's not just about getting the cheapest email lead possible. The quality is important. So what we generally find in those situations is still running conversion optimized campaigns as optimal, but when they land on that site ready to convert, they're also getting prompted to sign up for that list. And even though they are optimized for conversion, which ideally improves the traffic quality, we're still actually measuring in some cases that email cost as one of the key KPIs. So yeah, super cool strategy. I think it's much harder to execute when you're a brand in those situations, but it's certainly possible. And it's, as a marketer, it's fun to work on.
Yeah, for sure. And it also gets into the question of like just overall list growth from own channels. You can optimize a pop-up to maybe get a few percentage points on the opt-in rate, but you might not that might not necessarily be impacting total conversion rate. You might be getting poorer leads signing up for email or SMS that maybe you're wasting money sending those costly SMS messages on. So I think it's hard to find that happy medium of it might be easy for marketers to quickly look at, okay, I'm A/B testing all these different pop-ups. I'm increasing my opt-in rate, but conversion rate is staying the same. It's definitely a tricky one to solve for.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the only true KPI is the revenue and the profit. But when you're playing that game, you kind of have to extrapolate out what that looks like. So ultimately, the more variables you change, like you said, it could impact things. So that's why when you do run strategies like that, you definitely want to make sure you have a downside scenario planned from a revenue in standpoint, just so you're prepared for that and managing the risk.
Yeah, it sounds like from your perspective, and I think that's the proper way to do things. If you're going to do these tests, whether it's siloed within one platform or another, using KPIs, the overall business KPIs to measure the results of those tests instead of something like an opt-in rate would be the way to actually prove true incrementality from that specific test that you initiated.
Most of the time, I'd say so, yeah.
Awesome. And then I want to hear your take on this, Dylan, but from an operations standpoint, so a little bit of context on daily routine. They joined ShipBob a few months ago, but before that, they were leveraging a different 3PL, whom I won't name. There's a lot of great 3PLs out there, as are we. But essentially, some of the first things that we quickly identified, and a little bit of context on ShipBob and what we do for all of our net new customers. We have what we call an inventory placement program. So basically, when we take on a new brand, we'll audit their rates and everything, but we'll also take a look at their Shopify orders table, where their customers are based historically. And we have a system that basically will map out where they should be dispersing their inventory across multiple ShipBob locations to get the lowest shipping rates as well as the fastest shipping times. So they were shipping out of, I think somewhere it's like West Virginia, I believe, or somewhere in Virginia, somewhere in the Atlantic East Coast. But before ShipBob, they were getting some longer shipping times as well as some pretty expensive shipments out to California and the West Coast and even in the Midwest and the Rockies and so on. Basically, through our analysis and getting set up on ShipBob, they switched from fulfilling from one warehouse to using 4 with ShipBob. And the great thing is you don't have to send your inventory to 4 different locations. You send them to one of our locations and we'll disperse it across. But this is one of the biggest needle movers in terms of how we're saving brands a lot of cash, is really just creating more efficient shipping by dispersing inventory across several different locations. And we're doing this for almost all of our customers in terms of new onboarding. And then in terms of the overall savings from this, we were able to save 50 cents per order after switching fulfillment, as well as increasing their shipping times, with 95% of their orders going out to their customer's door within 2.8 days, which was another fun metric to see. But Dylan, I wanted to see just from your perspective, when you're auditing brands and doing some of the forecasting, what are some of the recommendations that you see just from overall streamlining operations and so on?
So important. I mean, I'll give you an example that is like exactly this. So, or exactly related to this. Generally, when you give some of these ad platforms larger audiences to work with, you're basically saying, like, let's say you're going on a lowest cost bidding strategy. Hey, go and find me the next cheapest conversion in this scenario. Ultimately, the bigger the population you give it, you're giving it more to work with to go and find that next cheapest conversion. The problem is, for some brands, if their logistics costs are just out of whack in certain places, you actually may want to find a cheaper conversion, or you may be willing to pay for, say, a more expensive conversion on the East Coast than the West Coast, or the West Coast and the East Coast, because of your unit economics. If you have terrible shipping costs because you're only fulfilling out of one location, or for this, that, or the other reason, ultimately what you may end up having to do in some extreme cases is actually segment out your campaigns by various locations, because you need to optimize for a different KPI. And you can't tell Meta or Google or these ad platforms that you value all these customers equally, because ultimately from a numbers standpoint, the math may not make sense at a certain CPA in, say, California, where in New York, it just makes complete sense due to the cost of shipping to that region. So again, it varies brand to brand, and there's different priorities, but ultimately, like, understanding the math behind what type of customer you're acquiring is integral to making sure you're creating that profit out of each customer. So I love this. It's super important.
Yeah, totally. I think obviously from like a marketing standpoint, there's so much you can do from an optimization standpoint, like you've already mentioned on the acquisition side of the audit, from testing new creatives and optimizing based on different attribution windows and targets and so on. But I think what a lot of brands are beginning to realize is that a big unlock that they can have from a profitability and contribution standpoint is saving a few percentage points on variable COGS can totally
100%.
a brand. Do you have any specific examples, maybe top of mind, that you've seen where maybe you guys have been scratching your head for a while on how to crack the code on new customer acquisition or just overall profitability, and maybe it's turned out that you could save quite a bit on operations fulfillment, whether that's switching 3PLs or even just having multiple locations and so on?
So many. I mean, like, it's always easier said than done. Like, on the marketing side, it's like, yeah, like I wish your variable costs were this, because it's really plausible to get this ROAS, but it's a lot harder to get that return on ad spend. And like, ultimately, different businesses are in different places where sometimes the probability of an increased ROAS is higher, but sometimes it's just like, you've tested so many different things. The only way the economics of this business work is if you can get these costs under control. And we've had numerous clients where they basically, whether they identify it or we say like, hey, like, we've seen a similar industry or a similar type of product have different cost structures than you guys do. Like, have you considered looking somewhere else or negotiating or this or that? Like, if you can get like leverage out of more effective unit economics, that will oftentimes be a lot easier than trying to say get a substantially better yield on return on ad spend. And also from a risk standpoint, in our view, in terms of how much dollars have to go into testing just to find that better yield, if you can just find cost savings on your shipping or something in that variable cost column, that can dramatically change a business overnight. And we've seen it time and time again.
Yeah, totally. And I think something that's not talked about enough is leveraging an update to operations as somewhat of like a rebrand for a brand. But so much of it, whether it's offering free shipping by streamlining your operations and being able to now offer free shipping, or having shop promise 2-day shipping guarantee, or just 2-day shipping tags on the website, can overall increase conversion rate, as well as something that we've been experimenting with and allowing brands and agencies to do is actually film content within our fulfillment centers, which I think can be very authentic.
That's awesome.
For a brand to actually show like the packing of one of their subscription boxes and what's included as a free for all subscribers in their free box. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for brands to leverage operations as part of a rebrand and being more authentic, as well as highlighting some of their key operational efficiencies that will have a halo effect on all of those key metrics. Like, it might overall increase conversion rate in the long run, and you'll see an increase in meta ROAS down the line as well. So I think there's a halo effect, and just kind of going back to that point that all of these points of the business are all really tied together, and they all will impact each other.
Totally.
Awesome stuff. Want to save a couple minutes if anyone has some questions in the chat. More than happy to answer any specific questions. If not, would love to, Dylan, maybe pass it over to you if you have any things that you want to focus on in terms of what Aplo Group is focused on this year. Any exciting new things, events you guys are doing, new projects you guys are working on, your newsletter, and so on. Would love to give you an opportunity to plug you guys as well.
Yeah, I'll speak to the service side. Obviously, I have two partners in the business, but I am generally the one most involved in service. So some of the things we're working on is In the last year, we rolled out the ability to do custom production, so actually facilitating net new video and photo shoots, and we're continuing to invest super heavily into that. So got a couple new benefits coming in the pipe in terms of our ability to execute higher level production in the next couple of months. So that's super fun. And then on the financial modeling and forecasting side, and kind of like, trying to bring finance into marketing and understanding that our clients care most about those business outcomes and less so about the in-platform reporting. We've been, doing that for almost 2 years at this point as part of our like a standard thing that's included in our paid acquisition services. And we are also working on some big rollouts to hopefully provide more assistance on the inventory side as well. So timelines are a bit TBD, but those are the kind of the two main focus areas of us in terms of expanding and improving our service. And I'm super pumped to work on it. It's a lot of fun for me. So yeah. How about you?
Yeah, we have a lot of exciting stuff. We have some new positioning rolling out, just in terms of saving brands money on shipping costs and so on. But something exciting from how I'm working with agency partners is, unfortunately, most agencies aren't as robust as you guys in terms of looking into operational metrics like this. So I built out a process for basically doing a mini supply chain guide that an agency can fill out a few key notes, like where a brand is shipping from, how many SKUs they have, what sales channels they're on, and basically I'll create them a free ShipBob audit on ways that they can optimize their existing fulfillment strategy, as well as ways that they can grow to new channels by using the same fulfillment provider for all. So kind of bridging the gap, making it helping agencies as well as brands get a better idea at ways that they could streamline efficiency. But similar to you, we're helping brands and very focused on brands, helping brands drive more profit and helping them save shipping costs. That is typically the number 2 line item on a P&L.
Oh yeah. That's awesome.
Well, awesome stuff. Want to give a second if anyone has any questions, but besides that, on the ShipBob side, feel free to scan this QR code and get a free quote from us. We're happy to give you a free audit on your existing fulfillment setup, and we'll create a custom one-pager for you. As well as on the Aplo side, Dylan, I'm not sure if you wanted to quickly go over your marketing on it, but essentially Aplo Group can offer you guys a similar audit that we just did for daily routine. They can offer this for you guys for free.
Yep, would love to do it. Just scan there if you want us to go through that. We can look into all things on the paid ad side, email, SMS, creative. Can also chat through forecasting and like how we may think about it, discuss how you're doing it currently. Happy to chat about all things ecom. And if we're not a great fit, also happy to point in the right direction if there's another provider. So I'm always happy to do our best to help where we can.
Awesome stuff, man. Well, unless anyone has any other questions, I think we're good to wrap things up a little bit early here.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll send a follow-up with the recording and it'll be found on YouTube. But again, just feel free to reach out with Aplo Group. They're a really awesome agency, and they can take a deeper look at all business metrics like we went over and really set you up for Q4 growth. Thanks everyone.
Thanks guys.